In the mid-2000s, this setup was the ultimate dream for anyone serious about producing high-quality HD video. Back in 2007, this full video and editing kit would have set you back a cool $10,000. But fast forward to 2025, and I picked it all up for just $145. But what exactly did that investment get you in terms of features and performance? We'll dive into that in just a moment, but let's talk about the gear itself. When it comes to content creation, there's no better place to start than the camera, and the Canon XH A1 is a fascinating piece of tech, even by today's standards. This thing was absolutely packed with many pro-level features that rivaled much pricier models of its time, like the Canon XH A1, which, for around $6,000, was double the cost of the XH A1. For starters, it came with multiple built-in ND filters, perfect for shooting wide open while maintaining that shallow depth of field. It offered professional-grade XLR audio inputs ideal for documentary and event shooters. Each channel could be manually controlled for gain and phantom power. Under the hood, it featured a 3/3" 3CCD sensor that delivered rich, high-contrast colors that produced footage that graded beautifully, with a distinctively cinematic look. And sitting over that sensor, a fast f1.6 Canon L-series lens with a 20x zoom. That kind of optical power wasn't common in camcorders at the time, and it produced incredibly sharp, detailed footage. One thing to note that this camera does in fact have an SD card slot, but that's a little misleading because it actually doesn't record to SD cards. You can actually only take stills with it or save custom image presets, meaning you can't just record to it and drag and drop footage like you can with a modern camera. So then what did it record to? Well, the XH A1 was actually built around MiniDV tapes. It recorded HDV footage using MPEG-2 compression, recording directly onto magnetic tape, which meant no file system, no folders, and definitely no instant access. If you wanted to get your footage onto your computer, you actually had to play the tape back in real time and capture it using FireWire. And while that might sound slow today, it was standard back then. SD card-based and compact flash HD cameras weren't common yet. And the ones that were, while advanced and better in some ways, were still limited in feature set compared to high-end camcorders. Sure, P2 cards technically existed, but they were expensive and aimed at broadcast professionals. For most creators, tape was still the norm. Despite the SD card slot, the XH A1 very much was a product of its time, designed for a deliberate, hands-on workflow that rewarded patience and precision. But hey, that's not all that bad. MiniDV tapes had some glaring drawbacks, but they also offered enough pros that I'd honestly use a modern version of them today. For example, durability. Tapes could sit in a drawer for years and still play back like the day they were shot, which is great for a cold storage backup. Meanwhile, I have SD cards that won't even give me an hour of footage and won't even last me the year. So therefore, I have to move footage from drive to drive, praying that the controller on the SSD or hard drive doesn't spontaneously die. I could talk about just cameras forever, but in digital filmmaking, the camera isn't everything. What's important is that in 2007, you were going to need a pretty beefy computer to edit that 1920 by 1080 HD footage, especially if you were hoping to avoid editing proxies. Luckily, we have a 2007 Core 2 Duo iMac, rocking a 2.33 GHz CPU with, you guessed it, 2 cores, with a Radeon X1600 GPU with 256 megabytes of DDR3. The machine was actually pre-upgraded from 2 gigabytes to 4 gigabytes of DDR2, which I believe did require some firmware trickery, which is good enough for me as the software we're going to be using is 32-bit. And for storage, we have a 1 terabyte Western Digital Caviar Blue hard drive. Now, quick PC nerd note, this particular model came out in 2012, not 2007, and while it's still era appropriate in spirit, SSDs weren't common yet, and spinning disks were the standard for video editing rigs. And let's not forget, back then, a 1 terabyte hard drive could cost around $400. That sticker shock helps us inflate the original kit's value and hit that sweet 10K price tag to keep in line with the video's title. I wouldn't trust a hard drive from 2007 anyways. At that age, you're just begging for corrupted sectors and a failed controller. Okay, this is a bit embarrassing, but technically this iMac would have shipped with Mac OS 10.4 Tiger, not Lion, but I couldn't find the original install disk. Luckily, the machine came with a flash drive for Leopard, which was actually a common upgrade at the time. I'm not planning to connect it to the internet, so Leopard should be just fine, and honestly, I don't care enough to upgrade. But I'm leaving some performance on the table as Snow Leopard is faster and much more efficient. But installing macOS on these older machines is a bit of a pain in the butt, so I'm sticking with what I've already installed. It's kind of ironic, actually. Snow Leopard was released as a performance-focused update to fix Leopard's excess. But even Leopard running on a 2007 machine feels smoother than some modern machines buried under layers of system processes and visual fluff. Back in 2007, there were already tons of options for editing software, and many of them came bundled with the computer itself. You had iMovie on Macs and good old Windows Movie Maker on PCs. Yeesh. A step up from that would be something like Pinnacle Studio. It was definitely an upgrade, but not exactly the kind of software you'd recommend to a career editor. Then you had the semi-pro tier, like Adobe Premiere Elements and Final Cut Express. Both under $300 and both designed to get you closer to that professional experience without the professional price tag. From there, you entered the big leagues: Premiere Pro, Sony Vegas, and Avid Media Composer, which at the time, Avid Media Composer was the standard for cutting feature films. But since we're on Mac here, it's worth pointing out that Apple had its own pro-level suite, one that was genuinely competitive with Avid in terms of features and workflow. Of course, I'm talking about Final Cut Studio, 2 in this case. For $12.99, this behemoth of a box came with most, if not everything you needed to begin creating professional video. Final Cut Pro 6 with timeline precision, ProRes support, multicam editing, and all the bells and whistles perfect for cutting up your indie documentary. Motion 3 for graphics and animation, 3D spaces, behaviors, and enough particle effects to crash your whole machine. And then for your DAW, Soundtrack Pro 2 for audio editing with multi-track mixing and actual control over waveforms, as opposed to consumer software with often only one audio track. DVD Studio Pro, because burning DVDs was still a thing. You could even design and include your own menus, chapter, motion backgrounds, and your own underground distribution house if you really wanted to. And of course, manuals thick enough to qualify as light reading for a film school semester. If I'm being completely honest, I haven't even made it through all of them. They can be a bit of a snooze fest, especially in a world where Google spits out answers faster than I can flip a page. Still, they've got their place in this collection, and I'd rather have them than not, in case the info ever gets buried by search engines and lost to time. But for now, let's move on to the editing experience. How does it actually feel to cut footage on this setup in 2025? Honestly, pretty good. It's simple, sticks to the fundamentals, and behaves like editing software should. I'm a little old school with my cutting. I don't use the mouse much unless I'm dialing in parameters. And thank God for that, because the single button mouse on this Mac is trash. After a few hours of editing, it's clear that this software was built with keyboard editors in mind. The shortcuts are tight, very close to industry standard, which is more than I can say for modern versions of Final Cut Pro. I'm talking about you, Final Cut Pro X. I won't get too deep into the other pieces of mixed software, but color does color, motion creates motion graphics. They're plenty usable for the era they come from. I'm no VFX Neo, at least not in this matrix, but I'm not clueless either. And while it definitely isn't Fusion and kind of feels like a bogged down version of After Effects, it gets the job done. That said, you won't want to get too fancy unless you've got a top tier GPU in your Mac Pro, like those newfangled HD 5770s or a Quadro FX 5600. But that kind of setup adds way more cost. And let's be real here, we're not making the next Avatar. Yet. Motion's not built for blockbuster VFX, but it'll get you through a lower third and a fake lens flare without melting your GPU. And lastly, we have the wide-angle lens attachment, which, for me, came bundled with the camera. Bit of a bonus considering the original price was around $279. It's honestly a no-brainer to include in your kit. Fisheyes are fun, especially if you're filming at skate parks, but there's nothing more versatile than a good old wide-angle lens. Sure, it adds a bit of heft to the camera, but that's actually a win. The XH A1 struggles a bit with stabilization in our pre-gimbal world, and that extra weight helps smooth out handheld shots. It's the kind of attachment that makes the whole rig feel more purposeful. Like, you're not just shooting video, you're operating a machine. So what does this kit really represent? It's a snapshot in time of when hardware was built to last, software respected the craft, and manuals came printed thick enough to stop a door. Using vintage tech in a modern world isn't just nostalgia, it's tactile, deliberate, and surprisingly capable. There's joy in the friction, in the whir of the tape deck, the click of a FireWire cable, and the patience it takes to capture in real time. We've come a long way, sure, but we've lost a lot too. Instant access, cloud sync, and AI-enhanced everything have their place, but they don't teach you how to feel your footage. It's like driving an older car, and that's why I built this kit. Not just to play with old tech, but to shoot something that feels like it came from that era. Something with texture, with weight, digital, with an analog feel, with the kind of charm that you only get when you're working hands-on. Because sometimes the best way to move forward is to cut with what came before. Oh shoot, we're at the end card here. I have some old videos that you can watch if you want to watch these. I wouldn't recommend it. It's just not really in tune with the content I'm going to be making going forward. Also, you could subscribe if you want to see more content similar to this and more alternative filmmaking methods. I'm trying to figure out what works, so welcome to Alt Frames.